Blog Talk Radio.
And good evening, New York Jets fans. I am Glenn Naughton. As you know, you are listening to Jet Nation Radio. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I, like many of you, feel like I am at the point where we all get to at this point every year, if I'm not mistaken, where we've had it up to our eyelids in draft talk. We are ready for the draft to get here. We have read, seen, heard, made, at this point, what feels like a million mock drafts. But guess what we're doing tonight? We're going to take a look at a mock draft, our very own mock draft this time around. And one thing we try to do, that I try to do with covering the Jets for Jet Nation, is not to go overboard with the mock drafts. I mean, it's tempting, especially when you're picking so high. When you're in a position the Jets are in, you want to do a mock draft every other day once the off season kicks off. But now that it's here, now that it's draft time, and when you've had enough of it, I try to limit it. I do 2 or 3 a year because we just get flooded with these things. You see these analysts, mock draft 7.0. I saw somebody last year who was in double digits, 12.0. How much can change in 4 days? Seriously. I did a mock draft on Thursday. I'll do another one on Wednesday morning. And, so much is going to happen between now and then, especially when the combines are done, the pro days are done, everything's wrapped up. I think NFL teams are juggling their entire board every 2 days leading up to the draft. It gets crazy, but they're still fun. We try to limit the madness by doing 2 or 3 mocks. We did one pre-combine, and now we've done one post-combine. So we're going to go over each pick, each round. We're going to talk about why we went with the guy we went with. We're going to talk a little bit about backup picks. Not a ton. Each round, one primary, one backup, if they don't go with that guy. Are we going to hit on any of these? Who knows? I mean, this is an almost impossible exercise, but let's face it, as diehard football fans who love this game, it's a fun thing to do. You can't take them too seriously, but what's the point in ignoring them if you're not going to enjoy the run up to the draft? Because let's face it, in our own minds, we kind of envision the team we like taking taking the players that we like in the draft. And one thing about this draft, and I know what happens every year, but I feel like I'm seeing more of it recently. Because whether you're looking at PFF or Matt Miller or any of the guys who put out the in-depth mock drafts, the longer mock drafts, people are all over the place. I'm seeing guys projected. What I saw the other day, I saw Colton Miller projected at number 19 in one mock draft, and then I saw him projected in the 90s in the other mock draft. So a lot of people are going to be really wrong in these mock drafts. So, again, it's a little bit of fun, and as we all know, tensions are high among Jets fans, and I can only imagine what life is like right now in Florham Park. Staying with the draft theme, we're also going to take a look at Mike Maccagnan's drafts since taking over, hits, misses, what he did right, what could he have done better. And we're going to go back further than that too, because honestly, when you look at Maccagnan's picks versus if you go back 15, 20 years of just looking strictly at first rounders, because let's face it, that's where you got to hit. I mean, you build your roster through the draft, and it's hitting on those late guys is what builds the backbone of a roster. But when you're swinging and missing regularly in the first round, that's really tough. That's really tough to stay competitive when you're doing that. So we'll look at Maccagnan versus the guys that have preceded him going as far back as Bill Parcells. So really quick before we get rolling here, if you want, follow me on Twitter, AceFan23. That's ACE Fan 23. on Twitter if you want to call in and talk a little bit of draft, talk a little bit of Jets. If you so desire, you can call us at 646-716-4697. Again, that is 646-716-4697. All right, so getting underway right off the bat here with our mock draft 2.0. Very unlikely there will be another one unless something completely off the wall happens that shakes things up hugely. So round one, as we all know, the Jets picking number 3 overall, traded up from 6 with the Colts, gave them a few second-rounders. First overall pick, we all know it's going to be a quarterback, and we're tabbing Baker Mayfield with this pick. 3rd overall out of Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield. So why Baker Mayfield? The thinking here is that Mayfield, don't want to hear about the height. Is it an issue? Yes. Is it enough to stop you from drafting a quarterback who can do the things he can do? No, that's foolish. If he were a mediocre quarterback who was limited in his other skills and was short, absolutely. But the way this guy can avoid pressure, move outside the pocket, make plays on the run, improvise, things like that, this is why we're projecting him. I'm projecting him to the Jets with the 3rd overall pick, and also, complete 100% guess. I mean, all of this stuff is anyway. But I really feel like I think either the Giants are bluffing and they're taking a quarterback at 2, or I think the Buffalo Bills or somebody is going to do something crazy and give up the farm to jump up ahead of the Jets to number 2 and take Josh Rosen. And the Bills may take Allen. They may take Josh Allen. Who knows? But I feel like Josh Rosen won't fall to 2 or to 3 with the Jets. And honestly, I'm fine with that. If the Jets end up with Josh Rosen, listen, I feel like everything right now, whether it's sports or politics or anything, everything is polarizing. Everyone is like, you can't possibly like 2 of these guys. If you have to like Mayfield and hate Rosen or like Rosen and hate Mayfield, I don't get it. Both guys have shown that they can be, or both guys have shown they have the skill set to be successful NFL quarterbacks. It's going to be down to the coaching staff, namely Jeremy Bates, to get these guys to play at a pro level, to get them to make a difference. And whether it's Baker Mayfield or Josh Rosen, I'm going to be happy on draft day regardless. If it's Josh Allen, I'm going to be a little bit like, I'm not going to be thrilled. I know a lot of Jets fans won't. Like anybody, I see the potential there, but too high risk to take in the 3rd round for a team that's, that is in such dire need of a quarterback. I think they're going to go with one of the safer picks. I think it's going to be Mayfield or Rosen. We're mocking Mayfield at 3 with the assumption Rosen is gone at that spot. And don't know if you caught it, but Rich Cimini said the other day, regardless of who's there, he said he thinks Rosen's their guy. He thinks Baker Mayfield. Cimini said that he thinks Baker Mayfield's the guy that even if Rosen is there, Mayfield's their pick. So we'll know in just a couple of weeks. Thank God. Thank God, enough of this. And bear with us tonight. We haven't done a show in a couple of days because of some technical stuff, so I'm hoping we're able to push through and get a whole show done without any issues. Just want to throw that in there. So, again, Mayfield, number 3 overall to the Jets. If it's not Mayfield, then it's Rosen. We're going to say Rosen falls, and the Jets grab him. Mayfield, does Mayfield go 1? It's hard to, I guess the only reason it's hard to imagine is because nobody is saying it will happen. And I know I've mentioned this on the show before, Scott McCloughan, former GM, highly respected talent evaluator, working in the Cleveland Browns front office, and they have crowded that front office with years and years of general manager experience. They want to get this right, and you kind of have to applaud that. But McCloughan is supposedly, at the moment, it's said to be sort of the right-hand man to their GM, and he said before signing on to work with the Browns, he said that in his mind, Baker Mayfield was hands down the top quarterback in this draft. So how much impact is he going to have in that war room? Nobody knows. But I wouldn't be shocked if Mayfield goes 1 for that reason, if McCloughan can sell them on Mayfield and make that happen. The film is there. The leadership is there. Tangibles, everything you look for is there minus the height. So you have to ask yourself, are we going to let a couple inches of height stop us from drafting this guy? And especially, you hear the comparisons: Drew Brees, Russell Wilson. Oh, well, he's not those guys. He's not those guys. Do we really know that? I mean, he's not, right now. He's not. He may never be. But just because it's infrequent that we see a quarterback of his height succeed in the NFL doesn't mean it's never going to happen again. It does happen. It's rare, but he is a rare type of player. The things he does, the traits he has. You don't expect a guy that height, or his size to go into the combine and get measured on, all the quarterbacks, something they started years back, they measure their velocity now. How much, yeah, fine, you're throwing a 50-yard pass, but how long is it taking to get there? Are you throwing it at 47 miles an hour, where it's taking significantly longer and that window is going to close by the time the ball is getting there? Or are you letting it rip? And Josh Allen, who's got, this howitzer of an arm, nobody was surprised when he finished at the top of that list in velocity. Baker Mayfield was number 2. Baker Mayfield can sling it. And you hear people say this guy can't throw the deep ball. Guess what? Those people aren't watching. Those people don't know what they're talking about. I mean, if you want to criticize a guy, criticize him. There's things and flaws you can find in everybody's game. None of these guys are perfect prospects. Baker Mayfield can launch it. So when you hear a guy, I don't care who he is. Anybody tells you Baker Mayfield can't throw a deep ball, stop listening there because they stopped watching a long time ago. So he's our pick at 1 or at 3 in the first round. Rosen is the alternate. Most polished guy, great mechanics. Everyone says what a bright guy he is. Jim Moore came under fire for, wording it in such a way that it sounded like he's being critical of Rosen. He came back after the fact, maybe cleaning up a little bit, saying he was misinterpreted. He thought it was a good thing. He's going to question coaches because he wants to challenge them and he wants to be challenged. He's not a millennial brat. He's just a super smart guy. So cerebral, great arm. Well, sorry, not great arm, good arm. And from what we're reading and from what our eyes are showing us, I went back and watched, several of his games. It was Texas A&M, that huge comeback win. He did some amazing things in college. Concerns with him, the concussions. And as I've said before, concussions are one thing, but it's multiplied, in my mind anyway, many times when you've got a guy with concussions whose father is a neuroscientist and already has a bunch of money in the bank. So how long does this guy play the game if he gets a couple more hits? It's not, in all likelihood it won't be a factor, but it's something that's it's hard to completely ignore. But me personally, as a fan, on draft day when they take Mayfield or Rosen, I'm going to be smiling ear to ear, and every Jet fan should be. And all eyes from that point on are on Jeremy Bates, because the number of times you see players come into this league who produce, who are not just produce. It's not just about stats and production, but guys who show the traits, do the things that need to be done to at least be good. Just even a good quarterback you can win with if you build around them. You don't have to be great. There's no reason Baker Mayfield, there's no reason Josh Rosen shouldn't be good NFL quarterbacks. That should be their floor. Their floor should be that they're good players. And even if you have a good quarterback for 15 years, when was the last time the Jets had that? Never. Never sounds about right. Let's get that in place here. I mean, come on. Enough is enough. So, of course, as mentioned earlier, the Jets traded their second-round picks in order to move up to 3, so no second-rounders for Jets as of right now, and don't see that changing come draft day. So they don't pick again until the third round. And you have to look at, behind, after quarterback, I don't think you would find if you're even a part-time fan and you're only paying attention every now and again, you know that this team hasn't had an edge rusher that opposing defenses or offenses cared about since John Abraham. That's a decade, folks. I know the QB drought's even worse, but the edge rusher situation is pretty embarrassing as well. Missed on several picks. Free agents haven't worked out. A couple guys flash for a few weeks and then disappear. So that's where we're going in round 3. Round 3, number 72 overall. The Jets need an edge rusher, somebody who can provide a presence for opposing teams to have to plan for. And this is a guy that I slotted here. I started this a couple weeks ago, work on it sporadically. When I first started, I feel like everything I saw had him going third, fourth round. Now everything I'm seeing him mid, late second round. So, again, we'll see. But I'm going with Kamiko Toure from Rutgers. Here's a guy, physical specimen, off-the-charts measurables, explosive traits displayed at the combine and on film. Didn't have a ton of production in college, but a lot of that was due to the fact that he was using a variety of roles. He wasn't primarily an edge guy getting after the quarterback. He did that, but he didn't do it as much as you might have expected. He's a guy that you look at, and I think I said this in my mock draft, that I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy who comes into the league and he's more productive in the pros than he was in college. He's that kind of guy. He's missed some significant time with injuries. You can't ignore that. But we're talking about round 3, and we're talking about possibly getting a premier pass rusher in the 3rd round. So I think you roll the dice. I think you look past the injuries, and you get a guy who you hope can be a difference maker off the edge. If you can't get him, if he's gone, as a lot of people are projecting now, if Toure goes sooner than that, my next pick, and even this guy is another player who I've seen mocked as a 3rd, 4th round guy, and heard you guys are familiar with Eric Galko. If you listen to this show, Optimum Scouting, we've had him on. We talked to him about this player, and he said he liked him a lot. He says he thinks he's a top 50. NFL.com disagrees. Other mock drafts I've looked at disagree. But Nyheim Hines, is it Nyheim? Nyheim or Nyheim Hines, running back out of NC State. I've watched a couple of his games. I've read a lot of the scouting reports on him because I like these versatile guys. Once I see that a player is multidimensional, can be moved around on offense, that's a flag for me, and I want to dig a little bit deeper and watch him a little bit. So what we saw from Hines was a versatile guy who during the combine, during workouts, he was asked to work as a slot receiver. He was asked to not just as a running back, and that's the type of guy he can be. He can be on the field for all 3 downs, and he's a guy you can move around as a chess piece. He ran a 4.38 at Indy, so he's as much as I want the primary positions in this draft to be addressed, I want them to be these key spots that we talk about all the time. Your corners, your quarterback, tackle, edge, all that stuff. That's where we're going, quarterback, edge, if Toure is there. But if Toure isn't and Hines is, then I think he's a guy who can sort of transform this offense or play a big role in doing that. So Toure's our primary. The backup pick, if he's not there, is Hines. The mocks I'm seeing now are telling me neither guy will be there. But again, some of these mocks are just all over the map. And one thing to keep in mind here, and this is probably a prime spot. This is a prime spot. And I try not to mock trades, but if Mike Maccagnan doesn't look to move down from this spot and add another pick. Because, let's face it, the Jets are short on picks. They've only got 6 of them. They have enough needs that they'd probably like some more. But, of course, as we know, it takes 2 to tango. So will they trade down? Remains to be seen. But if they can, I think this is a good spot to do it. And it's another thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about, what the Jets are going to do in round 3. Fans don't like to see it because they want those picks to roll in. They want those names to roll in when they're making picks. But a trade down in round 3, I wouldn't rule it out. I almost went with that as the primary. But I decided I would go just with players with the footnote. Of course, and, trade at any freaking point. But I would think that's a spot where they would look to move down. So that's our 3. Round 4, 107 overall. Another name that, as I said earlier, or with Toure and Hines, a name that I was consistently seeing as a 4th and 5th round guy. Now I'm seeing as a 3rd round guy. So I just kind of split the difference. I've seen them mocked in the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. I went with the assumption he'll be there in the 4th. And we're going, a spot where the Jets need to do some rebuilding, or at least some building some depth and for the future. Alex Kappa from Humboldt State. Hard to find film on the guy because he played at a small school. But if you watch the Senior Bowl and if you've read the scouting reports on him and watch whatever footage you can online of him, which, again, there's not much, but I watched what I could, the guy's absolutely – he's just a violent player who just – when he gets his hands on somebody, he ragdolls them. And no, that's not going to happen in the pros. I get that. He's doing that at low-level competition at Humboldt State. But the motor, the intensity, the skill set that allows him to do that that translates to a really good interior lineman in the pros, whether it's at center or guard in the future. He played tackle in college. That's not going to happen in the pros. 33-inch arms, just not going to see it. So he's going to kick to the inside, and I know the Jets signed Spencer Long, and I know the Jets brought back Jonathan Harrison, and I know the Jets brought in Travis Swanson from Detroit. By the way, I can't even remember if I talked about that move. I don't like that move one bit. To me, waste of a roster spot, waste of money, bring in a rookie center. That makes no sense. I don't. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. Hope he plays great. Don't see it happening. But Alex Kappa, Humboldt State, interior lineman is my pick. I think that he can play center, and let's face it, James Carpenter, I'm still not convinced he's safe going into this year. I think if they can replace him in the draft, they'll do it. They'll cut him and save that $4 million, or they'll stick with him, give him one more shot to make things work in his own offense, which we have no reason to believe will succeed. And I'm not saying that because I dislike James Carpenter. He's one of my favorite guys on the team. Really good player in the right system, but not this system. So if he's going to stick around, he sticks around. Time will tell. But even if he does, he's got 1 year left on his deal, and he's not coming back. So this is where, in the fourth round, if you can get an Alex Kappa, work him in at guard, maybe at center, where, again, Long has had injury issues. And he signed a 4-year deal, but it's a 1-year prove it. We've talked about that. The Jets can cut him after this season with no salary cap hit, or with no dead money. So Long might be a 1-year guy, and Carpenter has 1 year left on his deal. So they need to address the middle of that line at some point in this draft, and I think that's a good spot to do it in. Our alternate for this spot is going to be Jalen Holmes, defensive end out of Ohio State. Mo Wilkerson's gone. Thank goodness for that. There are still some bodies in place, some good players in place, whether it's Steve McClendon, who we talk about ad nauseum in terms of how underrated he is. Very good player. Jets are lucky to have him, but he's getting a little bit long in the tooth, probably not around for more than another year or two. Again, no Mo Wilk, Coney Ealy, as many of you probably saw, went ahead and signed with the Cowboys for pennies, by the way. I really thought the Jets would have had some interest in bringing Coney Ealy back. He ended up leaving, signing with Dallas for $900,000 or 1.2 and 800 guaranteed, something like that. So really small, comparatively, or relatively to what people were expecting. So they do need some depth there. They do need some youth. And Jalen Holmes is a guy who can fill that role as a guy, rotational player early on, and eventually, take over for Steve McClendon sometime down the road. Jalen Holmes, good player, big program, productive guy, and some, again, with these projections, I've seen him going anywhere from round 3 to 5. So again, just kind of fell in the middle, said fine, round 4, put him there, and go with it. So that makes Alex Kappa the primary pick for round 4, with the backup pick being Jalen Holmes out of Ohio State. Now the 5th round. This is a pick, again, these projections. I'm having a hard time myself believing some of these are right. But this is a guy who I am consistently seeing in the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round. I mean, it's crazy at this point to see where some of these guys are being projected. But if this guy's here in the 5th, and I'm the Jets, I'm thrilled. And I'm taking tight end Troy Fumagalli from Wisconsin. Because this guy, I mean, he is everything the Jets lack in a tight end. He can block. He's got fantastic hands. Well, he got 9 fingers. Despite 9 fingers. Watch some of the work this guy's done. Go online. Watch some of his full games. Watch him block. Watch him catch the football. If you don't have time to watch a full game, just look at some internet, some highlight reels. I mean, the guy makes some unbelievable catches. 6'6", could be an immediate difference maker in the red zone. And imagine taking a guy, imagine grabbing a 6'6" tight end. And I know I mentioned this on a previous show, and I'm going to get more into this a little bit more. But this offense, people are, and I try not to be too much of a homer. I really do. And I try to look at everything objectively. But especially with these developments, Robbie Anderson having all of his charges dropped, he might only be facing like a 1-game suspension if we go off of history and look at guys like Sheldon Richardson. So if Robbie Anderson's looking at a 1-game suspension, the Jets are in position to have Robbie Anderson and Terrell Pryor on the outside. You're talking about 2 guys that are 6'3", 6'4", and both run sub-4 440s. And then you have Jermaine Kearse, Quincy Enunwa, if he's healthy, he's the 4.45 guy. You have the kids and Stewart and Hanson. I mean, they're going to be able to open things up in a big way underneath. At least they should be. You throw in a 6'6" tight end to work the middle of the field with Pryor and Anderson opening things up. There's a lot of opportunity for a tight end to excel in this offense if the quarterback play is good enough and depending on how Jeremy Bates runs the show. But I have a hard time envisioning this offense not being explosive. Because, again, at Quincy 4.45, a healthy Enunwa, that's 3 guys on the field at once, 2 of them 6'3 plus in the 4.4. Well, 2 of them under 4.4, the other one in the 4.4s. And then you throw in a 6'6 tight end. I love that. That as a safety valve, 6'6" safety valve. And, of course, any team can say, sure, throw in a 6'6 guy, but that doesn't make as much difference if teams can, crowd your offense from 20 yards and in, they don't have to respect the deep ball. You're playing the Jets, you're going to have to respect the deep ball on both sides of the field. Safeties are going to have to back off. And that's going to leave your linebackers one-on-one with this guy. So that's my hope there. And now the alternate pick here, and of course some of this, what comes into play here is whether or not they can get a Toure earlier in the draft. And as was the case with Toure with some durability issues, this guy's got even more durability issues. He's missed a ton of time at Utah. But Kylie Fitz, edge rusher from Utah. This guy missed, I think he only played, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I believe he played in 22 games at Utah, only 22 games. His combine stuff was his combine numbers showed great traits in terms of explosiveness. His film shows great explosiveness. And I believe he had a total of 15 sacks in just 22 games, which is really, that's an eye-popping number. That's a guy, even if when you're drafting a guy that late, even if you use him as a situational pass rusher, to say, hey, let's find a way to kind of limit his, the risk of injury and put him in a situation where he's going to have an opportunity to get after the quarterback 12, 13, 14 times a game and make some plays. I mean, it's tough to ignore production like that. And here it is, actually. I just looked it up. So he played, 22 college games. In 22 games, he had 11 and a half sacks, 14 tackles for loss. This guy gets into the backfield. Okay? But the issue, again, last year, played only 8 games. The year before, 1 game. The year before that, his most extensive playing time, played 12 games, had 7 sacks. Freshman year, he only played 1 game. That was at UCLA before he went to Utah. So, again, 22 games, but double-digit sacks and double-digit TFLs and 11 passes defended, forced 5 fumbles. This guy could be a playmaker. He could also be, hey, look, he may wash out of the league with injuries. But listen, most guys who you're taking that late wash out of the league for one reason or another. Why not roll the dice on a guy who could be a legitimate difference maker off the edge with something that, something you haven't, that you've been lacking for that long. So he's our second choice behind Fumagalli in round 5. Kylie Fitz out of Utah. This brings us to round 6. 6th round, again, the deeper in the draft you get, the less likely these guys make the team. You want to get some developmental guys here. You want to get guys who have traits, guys that you look at and say, okay, not a polished player. If he was, he'd be going earlier. But a guy who has workable traits, things that we can, try to develop over time, and this guy can be, a contributor down the road. For this pick, and I actually saw a mock draft today. I forget who it was. I don't want to credit Tony Pauline. Maybe I forget who. I don't know. But actually, and I think it was the 6th round, 5th or 6th, had this exact player going with the Jets, Timon Paris out of Stony Brook. So local guy just up the road. He's got excellent size, plays with a mean streak, and he's got, much, for a guy his size, 300 plus, really quick feet. A lot of people feel like he could eventually be a starting left tackle in the league. And to get a guy like that in the 6th round is a great opportunity. I've seen him mocked much earlier. Well, sorry, not much earlier. I've seen him mocked sort of 5th round. I don't think I've seen him higher than that. So round 6, you get a guy who's a developmental guy, could step in at some point because, again, much like James Carpenter having 1 year, Kelvin Beachum has, he's got a few years left on his deal, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets look to move on from him if they can find a better option. I do believe, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think next year, if the Jets get a quarterback in this draft, I think next year the top target becomes left tackle, especially if they can find an edge guy in this draft, because you got to have a guy there you can count on. And Beachum is good. I've said it before. Kelvin Beachum, good player. Not a great player, but he plays at a decent level, and he's paid at a decent level, in terms of left tackles. Middle of the pack salary, middle of the pack performer. I have no issue with, living with him for another year, maybe even 2. When people say this, this entire O-line has to be overhauled, replace everybody, that's just idiocy. You can't do that. And really, Beachum was probably the best of a bad bunch last year. But he did a solid job. And sometimes you're going to have that in the league. No, sorry, not sometimes. All the time. Some guys on every roster are good football players. And fans sometimes get wrapped up in the fact that a guy isn't a Pro Bowler or a guy isn't an All-Pro. Well, then he must suck. There's no middle ground for some people. In reality, to teams, executives, GMs, there is middle ground. And if you have a good player in a specific spot, you're not pressed to replace him right this minute. You're going to go after your more pressing needs. So in the next year or 2, left tackle becomes a bigger issue. That's when the Jets may target someone higher, but nothing wrong with using a 6th round pick this year to try to get a guy who could be, who may eventually be that starting left tackle, maybe a swing tackle for you, whatever it may be down the road. Our alternate pick for the 6th round, we're going to go with NC State D lineman Kentavious Street. Unfortunate situation for him, as some of you may have heard. He injured himself during a pro day recently, torn ACL, out for the year. So he's done for the season. And for me personally, it's stuff like that I feel like teams should take advantage of, namely the Jets. Again, they need some depth on the D-line. If you're going to write him off for a year, a guy who is projected 3rd, 4th rounder, I have no problem with that. As we said, as we all know, the later you go in the draft, the more likely these guys are to wash out. So when you're picking in the 6th round, you're usually picking a guy who has about a 15% chance to stick in the league. Why not grab a guy, even if it means he's got to take a season off on injured reserve, to come back next year and be a guy who can fight for some significant playing time? Kentavious Street, very athletic guy. Coaches at NC State spoke very highly of him. Undervalued player or underrated player. And I would have no problem with the Jets saying, let's grab this guy, let's put him on IR, and we can start him next year, or let him fight for a starting spot next year. Makes perfect sense to me. So that brings us to round 7, final round, and this one, a couple people had some choice words for this, which is fine. That's it. These are all about throwing out opinions and getting feedback, and I don't know. I think that when you look at the Jets quarterback depth chart right now, even if, let's say, you put pick 3, whoever it is, let's say pick 3 is on your depth chart with Josh McCown, with Teddy Bridgewater, with Bryce Petty, Christian Hackenberg, Joel Stave. You're looking at 6 quarterbacks. But let's get real for a minute here. Josh McCown is 39 years old. This is his last season, if he plays a full season, if he stays healthy. Really, none of us hope he plays a full season, because whoever gets taken at 3 needs to step up and take that job at some point. But you've got Josh McCown. You've got Teddy Bridgewater. Hasn't taken a meaningful snap in 2 years. Took a couple snaps in a late season game last year. Handed it off a couple times through 1 or 2 passes. But, I mean, let's face it, he hasn't played a game. He hasn't played more than a couple snaps in a couple of years. We have no idea what's going on with Teddy Bridgewater's leg, or how he's going to hold up to the rigors of a full season. He might not make it past training camp. Then you have Bryce Petty. Does anyone think Bryce Petty's a long-term guy on this roster anymore? Does anyone think Bryce Petty is safe? I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'd say highly, highly, highly unlikely. He's around. Could even see him being moved during the draft. What value does he have? We don't know. I mean, it's hard to believe he would have any value based on how he played, but we do know, or at least it was reported last season, that multiple teams contacted the Jets to try to trade for Bryce Petty, and the Jets wouldn't give him up. Now, it may have been that they were offering a seventh-rounder. Who knows? But if there was a team that maybe was offering a fifth last year, maybe you call that same team and say, do you want him for a seventh? Because there's a lot of egos in this league. Guys can fail. Guys can get drafted and look terrible for your team. And all you need is two other executives out there who feel like, you know what, we could turn him into something. Or sometimes one. There's one guy who looks at him and says, I like that kid coming out of Baylor. My coaching staff, my QB coach, my O coordinator, they like him. They think they can make him a viable backup. And to us, that's worth a sixth or seventh rounder. And maybe you move Bryce Petty for a sixth or seventh rounder. Unlikely. Not impossible. But either way, either scenario, and Bryce Petty's off the roster. Christian Hackenberg, would anyone be surprised if he's not on the roster when the season opens up? He's been terrible. There's no way to sugarcoat it. He's been terrible. He hasn't done one thing that makes you look at him and say, oh, this could be it. He could be the guy. For him to stick in this league, it's going to take a turnaround of epic proportions to go from a guy who can't do anything right to being a viable NFL quarterback. I don't see it happening. So, and I don't know anybody who does. Anybody who lives outside of the state of Pennsylvania and didn't go to Penn State. And then Joel Stave, camp body, he's gone. So what does that leave you with? McCown for a year. Bridgewater might not even make the roster. Petty, probably gone. Hackenberg, probably gone. Joel Stave, gone. What are you left with? Your number three? And, maybe Hack shows enough that they keep him around. But what I'm getting at here with this long-winded explanation is because round 7, I'm saying grab Chase Linton out of Marshall, another quarterback. I know you took one at the top of the draft. Take another one here. Cut ties with Petty, cut ties with Hack, cut ties with Stave. You go into camp with 4 bodies. If Bridgewater and McCown light it up and really impress, you try to stash Linton on the practice squad. I mean, let's face it, if he makes it this far, what are the odds that there's a team dying to have him? If any team can have him that late. This team, they need answers at quarterback, and it's not just at the top of the depth chart. That's going to be answered early in the draft. Later on, take another guy. Take Chase Linton. Take any of the 7th-round guys. Linton's the name that I like, the guy that I like the most, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've watched 3, 4, 5 games of every guy who's projected to go in the 6th, 7th round. But from what I have had time to pick through, I like Linton. So we'll see. The alternate there, and this is a guy who's honestly, just in the last couple of days, really, has become one of the more interesting possibilities, or one of the more interesting players for me personally, because he's another one who just a couple weeks ago, everything I saw was saying 6th rounder, 7th rounder. Last day of the draft could be, he's going to be some team's last pick. But now I'm starting to see a little bit of, a couple whispers here and there that this guy is one of the better corners in the draft, or at least, sorry, not one of the better, but good enough. I looked at NDT Scouting. Check them out. NDTscouting.com. They've ranked all 300 players in the draft. So I'm thinking if you're a 6th, 7th round guy, you're going to be ranked well into the 200s, 270, 280. And, a lot of it due to playing at a small school. But Danny Johnson out of Southern, I actually had him, if I'm not mistaken, I had him as the Jets' 6th or 7th round pick in the first mock draft I did. He might be the only name that appeared on both drafts. I liked him. And then I have him here as the 7th rounder, the alternate 7th rounder, if not Litton. In this draft, he's got some punt return ability. But then I look and see NDT scouting to see where they rank him. They got him at 128, which is not bad. That's sort of, that's not 7th round territory, especially for a corner. When you figure in positional value, this guy could go to 3rd, 4th round if other teams have him ranked along the lines of where NDT scouting has him. So we'll see. But he's played on the outside. He's played in the slot. I like him as a slot guy. I don't think the Jets have a true slot guy on the roster. I know people talk about Buster Screen as a slot guy, but let's face it, he's probably better on the outside than he is in the slot. People don't often say that because people just don't realize it. Slot corner was kind of the label stuck on Buster Screen when he got here, so that's all people talk about him as. But really, he's done his best work with the Jets, and I use that term loosely because there hasn't been a lot of great work. There's been some good, enough good for him to stick around, but in the slot, he's been pretty atrocious. Danny Johnson is a guy who, again, he's got experience inside and outside and as a punt returner, and as a 7th round pick, I think would be an absolute steal. But starting to see him in some mocks that have him going far sooner than round 7. So we'll see who's right and who's wrong about Danny Johnson. Again, small school guy. So just a quick recap. Round 1, we have Baker Mayfield with the assumption that Josh Rosen is gone, and perhaps even if he's not, as I said earlier, Rich Cimini of ESPN New York, a longtime Jets beat writer, saying that he feels that Mayfield is the Jets' target at 3 regardless. But our backup pick, alternate pick, if Mayfield is not, or if it's not Mayfield, then we're going to say Josh Rosen out of UCLA. 3rd round, Jets address their next biggest need, edge rusher, Kimoko Toure out of Rutgers. The backup pick there is Nyheim Hines out of NC State. Explosive guy, ran a 4.38, can move around, catches the ball well, gives you a nice chess piece on offense. In the 4th round, it's Alex Kappa out of Humboldt State. Didn't play at a big school, didn't play against high level of competition, but was very impressive at the Senior Bowl, and just about as physical as they get. Daniel Jeremiah and Mike Maccagnan couldn't say enough about how intense and violent that guy was in the trenches. And, I mean, who doesn't want a guy like that on your team, right? Alternate pick there is Jalen Holmes, defensive end out of Ohio State. The Jets do need some depth there. See what happens. Round 5, as I said earlier, Troy Fumagalli out of Wisconsin, great option in the middle of the field, 6'6", he can block. The Jets have a guy who can block in Eric Tomlinson. They have a guy who hopefully, we don't know yet, hopefully can catch the ball a little bit in Jordan Leggett. Neil Sterling also impressed a little bit. Jets have added a couple guys for free agency, but really nobody who's got that combination. Great size, great hands, and good blocker. Not a great blocker, but a good blocker. So he would instantly become a guy who could rise to the top of the Jets depth chart, even if you get him in round 5. Whether or not he does, wherever he goes, we'll see. Had someone tell me earlier they think he's the type of guy the Patriots go after, and I certainly hope not, because that's not a guy that you want to see. You want to try to game plan for. The backup pick there is Kylie Fitz, as we mentioned earlier. A lot of injuries in college, but very, very productive as an edge rusher, and he will get drafted. He will be drafted quite high, or higher than you would expect for a guy who's missed as much time as he's missed, is what I should say. I've, again, seen him projected earlier than this. I've seen him projected later than this. We'll see where that goes. 6th round, 179 overall, Timon Paris, Stony Brook. Good size at left tackle, good intensity, highly regarded guy as a late round steal. I've seen him on a couple of lists as, sort of a sleeper pick, as I mentioned earlier. Saw him mocked to the Jets by one of the, I don't know if it was CBS Sports, whoever it was. It was a full 7-round mock, had Paris going to the Jets in round 6. The alternate there was Contavious Street, who we know is going to miss the season with a torn ACL. But why not roll the dice on a guy who is going to miss a full season, but whose talent justifies a much higher draft slot? That's a win-win situation, if you ask me. And as I said earlier, and broke down the reasoning, why you go with another quarterback here, Chase Linton out of Marshall. I think Petty, Hack, and Stave are gone. We don't know what to expect from Bridgewater's knee. Too many questions. Zero answers at quarterback at this point. We don't know who's going to be around. We have a pretty good idea who won't, and to me that leaves an open spot for another body at quarterback. The alternate, and honestly, the more I look at it from my view, if Danny Johnson's on the board, I'd probably flip these two. I'd probably make Litton the backup and have Danny Johnson be my top choice for that 7th-round pick if he's still there. But if NDT has it right, he won't be there. You're not going to find a quarterback who's ranked in the middle of the pack who goes at the bottom of the draft. More likely he moves up than moves down. So that wraps that up. Hope you like some of the picks. If not, listen, that's what these mock drafts are about. People write them, people publish them, put them out there, and you just get torn up, and it kind of goes with the territory. It's a fun exercise, fun to think about different perspectives on where guys fit, why guys make sense, why guys don't make sense. A lot of different things, countless possibilities. And let's face it, we are all beyond ready to have those possibilities to, have these scenarios play out. Just like let's get it over with, because not only is it building your roster, but it's another monumental moment in the off season where it's all right. We're that much closer to the season. We're that much closer to football, and really that can't get here fast enough either. So, of course, the man pulling the trigger on draft day, making these picks, is going to be Mike Maccagnan. It's going to be his 4th draft with the team. He's had 3 drafts with mixed results, which is, honestly, what GM doesn't have mixed results? Some results, obviously, though, better than others for other GMs. Maccagnan's had some hits, some misses, and let's face it, 3 drafts, you can really only sensibly kind of say the results are in for one of them, and just more of a progress report, I suppose, on the other spots, the other years. But let's take a look. What I want to take a look at first is, because I mentioned it earlier, and I brought it up in the last show, maybe in the one before that, I forget, about fans saying how tired they are of Mike Maccagnan taking the safe way out. And I threw out some names of former first-round picks that were just not very good, whether it's because how they were used or who they played under, their production on the field, their behavior off it, whatever, how many, if they ever re-signed with the team, that type of stuff. So let's go back and take a look real quick and first compare Mike Maccagnan's first-round picks to the picks over the last 20 years, or the 17 previous years. So right now you've got Leonard Williams, Mike Maccagnan's first-round pick, who the team is Manish Mehta, New York Daily News, reporting that the team's expected to exercise a 5th-year option. Shocking move, I know. That was about the easiest decision Mike Maccagnan had to make this offseason. So Leo's option's getting picked up. Of course, in year 2, first round, Darren Lee. He's been up and down. He's been more bad than good, but he's at least shown some signs. He's done some things that make you think, all right, this guy might be a good player in the league, But you give it a year or two, he's, at least a year from now, he's only been in the league 2 years. Then, of course, this past offseason, picking 6th overall again, it was Jamal Adams, who had himself a nice rookie season, and looks to be really a piece that is going to be in place for a while. I don't think you'd find anyone in their right mind who doesn't think Jamal Adams is going to be a very good player. So that's Mike Maccagnan's 3 first-round picks. Jamal Adams, which, as I said, most would agree is going to be around for a very long time. Darren Lee, he's a question mark at this point. Done some things well, other things not so well. Then Leonard Williams right behind him, and he's another guy who's going to be around here for a long time. So you got Leo, you got Darren Lee, you got Jamal Adams. So those are Mike Maccagnan's three first-round picks. And people are tired of this safe approach. Let's stop taking the best player, is what some people are saying. So going back, let's go back 20 years. Let's go back to 2017. Okay, and I'm going to rattle some of these names off, and with a quick synopsis of how exactly their careers unfolded with the Jets, good, bad, or otherwise. James Farrior, 1997, first-round pick for the Jets. 97, eighth overall pick out of Virginia. So James Farrior, people say, oh, he was a great player. He had a really, really good career, which he did, but he had a really good career when he left the Jets. So you can't call him a bust, but he wasn't of much value to the Jets. The Jets played him out of position. I believe they had him playing outside a lot. Then he goes to Pittsburgh. He played 5 years, 6 years with the Jets. It wasn't until his final season that he really came into his own, which, typical, right? 53 tackles year one. Then over the next 3 years, he starts 2 games, 4 games, 6 games. He's a backup. Then he gets back in a starting role in 2001, 106 tackles. And then, of course, he hits free agency. He goes to Pittsburgh and becomes, a key cog in the middle of that Steelers defense for many years. He wins some Super Bowls. So as a Jet, he was a pedestrian linebacker who had one good year, moved on to greener pastures, and had himself a damn good career. So again, you can't call it a bust, but he didn't do a whole hell of a lot with the Jets. Then you go 98, no first-round pick. Jets didn't have a first-rounder that year. They didn't pick till the second round. Dorian Boose out of Washington State, and Dorian Boose, we're not even going to talk. Well, again, second-rounder, doesn't matter. He was terrible. 99, no first-round pick. First pick they made was Randy Thomas, second-rounder, damn good player. But again, not a first-round guy. 2000, now this is, this draft, this draft yielded some great results in terms of individual accomplishments, but the team never won anything. But still, we're just in looking at whether or not the first-rounders were quality picks. You had Sean Ellis taken at 12. The next pick, you took John Abraham at 13, arguably the two of the best picks, best first-rounders the Jets have ever made. And 5 picks later, you get Chad Pennington at 18. And then Anthony Beck, tight end, goes at 27 out of West Virginia. So Ellis was fantastic. Abraham, fantastic until he got traded. Pennington, we all know the story there. Had himself a nice year or two. Couldn't stay healthy. Probably would have been a middle-of-the-road to upper-level quarterback if he'd stayed healthy, but he didn't. And Beck, who was he's kind of a jag tight end, good for a few catches, went down on first contact. He wasn't a guy anybody game planned for. He wasn't a game breaker. He was a solid blocker, catch the ball down on first contact. Nothing to write home about, but a contributor. And that, let's face it, there's different levels of production you can get out of these picks. Some guys going to be, some guys going to be great. Some guys going to be out of the league in a year or two, and then there's going to be everybody in between. And Anthony Beck falls somewhere in between. You can't say he's a failure of a pick, but he wasn't what you hoped to get out of a first rounder. Following year, Santana Moss, again another guy, played well with the Jets, didn't do much with the Jets. Had one big season in 2003, but let's face it, he was limited in the fact that he played with Chad Pennington for a lot of his time. Didn't have a quarterback with the arm to get on the ball. He goes to Washington his first year there. He has almost 1,500 yards receiving. Crazy. So, was it a bust pick? No, but he didn't do a whole lot with the Jets. No fault of his own, though. If we're going to be honest about the situation. Brian Thomas, another first-round pick. He will always be remembered for being picked ahead of Ed Reed, who, listen, you can second-guess drafts until the cows come home. Every single year, go and look at the draft order, look at every player that was taken after the guy that your team took, and say, look how stupid we are, we did this. But I think the Ed Reed thing stands out because it's kind of along the lines of the Kyle Brady over Warren Sapp pick. Like, Jets fans knew this team needed a DB, and the last thing they needed was another body for that front seven. They already had Ellis and Abraham. They needed that DB to be a difference maker on the back end. Jets fans wanted Ed Reed. The Jets went with Brian Thomas. He had himself an average career. Solid player, good player. Nothing great. Dwayne Robertson, kind of feel for that guy, if I'm being honest. He was miscast. First of all, he had a degenerative hip condition the team knew about, and they still drafted him. That makes the team idiots right off the bat. You just drafted a guy and paid him a ton of money, and you know that his hip is falling apart. This is what the Jets do. Traded up to take him at number 4 overall. But the guy, he was miscast in Eric Mangini's defense. He was probably 30 or 40 pounds too light to play the spot Eric Mangini had him playing. The guy didn't complain, busted his ass, held his own. Wasn't great, but held his own. Had his career cut short due to injuries. So based on the fact you traded up multiple picks to get him, you knew he was injured, he was gone after a few years, it's hard not to call that one a bust. But, again, I think he, had he been healthy and had he been put in the right system, I think he would have had himself a longer career. Following year, Jonathan Vilman, year one. Again, a very good player, but was miscast in Eric Mangini's system. Unlike Robertson, who was kept to play in the wrong spot, they traded Jonathan Vilma, who was a good player, went on to win a Super Bowl with the Saints. The following year, no first-round pick. The year after that, 2 first-round picks, DeBrick and Nick Mangold. Fantastic, fantastic draft. The rest of that draft was not very good at all, but at the top 2, really nice haul. 2007, Darrelle Revis. Nothing needs to be said there. We know how great he was. The following year, 2 more first-round picks. Vernon Golston, arguably the biggest bust in draft history, at least in terms of the Jets. Then Dustin Keller at the back when the Jets traded back up into round 1, grabbed him with the 30th pick. Good player. Following year, Mark Sanchez. Defensive running game carried him to some playoff wins. He is a player himself, was never very good. Kyle Wilson, the following year, bust. Muhammad Wilkerson played until he got paid. Then he was a bust. Quentin Coples, all the talent in the world, not enough heart, bust. D. Milner, couldn't stay healthy, bust. Sheldon Richardson, incredibly talented player, some off-field issues, had to be traded, never made it to a second contract with the Jets. Can't call him a bust, but when your first rounder is off the team after a few years, it's still not the outcome you're looking for with these first-round picks. Then after we saw Milner and Sheldon, the following season, Calvin Pryor, bust. So a lot of busts on that list. A lot of guys who were just terrible, out of the league, off the team in a matter of a couple seasons. Comparing that to Leonard Williams, Darren Lee, Jamal Adams. Adams and Williams aren't going anywhere for a while. Every reason to believe they'll be significantly better than the majority of first-rounders we just mentioned. And then Darren Lee, the jury is still out. So a little bit premature to say who's going to be what in terms of the guys taken in the last couple of years. But I think it's fair to say that Mike Maccagnan, looking back at how the team is drafted, especially the 7 or 8 years right before Maccagnan's arrival, that was some rough territory with those picks. And now in terms of looking at where Mike Maccagnan has hit and where he's missed in rounds 1 through 7, look at his first draft, okay? Right now, it looks to be a complete disaster. Well, all but one player in Leo. So you get Leo at 1. Then you take Devin Smith in the second round, 37th overall. Now, because hindsight's 20/20 and revisionist history and all this stuff, people rip the pick, they trash the pick, stupid this, stupid that. Fans were overwhelmingly on board with this move when it was made. Analysts graded it, gave it a very good grade. He was an explosive player at Ohio State. Everyone expected the same from him in the NFL. I think it was Ray Lucas, former Jets quarterback, current analyst, said you throw this guy a 50-50 ball, it's a 70-30 ball. He's going to come up with it. Not great height, but great timing, high point the ball. Everybody said this was a great pick. As it turns out, he's just been riddled with injuries, one injury after the next. So, IR'd a couple seasons in a row. He's only played in 14 games in 3 years now. So, is he on his way out of the league? Quite possibly. It's one of those things where the Jets probably keep him around because why the hell not? He's cheap enough and he's a second rounder and he's got enough talent. Let's see what he can do. But I think at this point expectations are close to nil. Lorenzo Malden, outside linebacker, Louisville, another bust. Well, I'm sorry, another potential injury bust. He flashed as a rookie. He looked good as a situational pass rusher. Year 2 was up and down for him. And then last year, I've said this before, the thing that irked me about last year, he got hurt, and it was downplayed like he's going to miss a couple weeks, he'll be back soon. And then it became he misses the first preseason game, the next preseason game, another preseason game, and then all of a sudden it becomes, well, he's going to go to IR. You think, well, first he's in a couple weeks. Now it's been all of preseason. Now he's on, temporary, short-term IR. And then the window comes for him to be activated. He's still not activated. And then he has season-ending back surgery. So when you tell me you guys are going to miss a couple weeks, a few weeks, and he misses an entire year, that's concerning. So that may end up being another bust due to injuries. But high-character guy, hard not to root for, and really be nice to see him bounce back and play well. Bryce Petty, as we discussed, probably on his way out. Jarvis Harrison never made it, never appeared in the game, fifth-round pick. Deion Simon's an interesting guy. Played well when given the opportunity. Looked like he was going to make the roster again last year. Played really well in the preseason. Just didn't make it. Moved to the practice squad, and Mike Pennell took his spot. And now that Pennell's been extended, I think Deion Simon may be gone. Time will tell, but I think that it looked like that might have been a decent class just in being able to say, hey, if Leo pans out, if Petty becomes a decent backup, and you keep playing Simon, that's not a bad draft class. As it turns out, Petty regressed last year from the previous year, and Simon's been surpassed on the depth chart and may not be around this year. So when all's said and done, you might be down to Leonard Williams out of that entire draft class if Devin Smith and Lorenzo Malden don't come back from their injuries, which at this point, who the hell knows? Year 2, Darren Lee, as we said, versatile, guy who can be used in a lot of different roles. Todd Bowles doesn't move him around quite as much as I expected him to. I thought we'd see him rushing off the edge a lot more, but we don't. But he's had his ups and downs. He's shown he can play in the league. It's going to come down to whether or not he can play at a high level. Christian Hackenberg, complete bust. Just thank God that guy was a second-round pick and not worse. I mean, taking him in the first would have been even that much more inexcusable. But when you look at he's up there. The only reason he's not a bigger bust than Vernon Goldston is because he was taken in round 2. But the fact that he hasn't gotten on the field is just embarrassing. Jordan Jenkins, was one of Mac's better picks. Third rounder out of Georgia, edge setter. He's not going to be a big sack guy, but the comparison's been made a million times, and rightfully so. He's the next Calvin Pace. He's a guy who's going to carve out a nice 8, 9, 10-year career doing what he does. He'll get you the occasional sack, but he's going to be a guy who holds up his side of the defense. Justin Burris, corner out of North Carolina State, looked good in camp as a rookie. Didn't get on the field very much. The team said they wanted to get him out there more in year 2. They did, and it was more bad than good from him. Disappointing. I know me personally, I said many times on this show that I thought he was a guy that might emerge as a guy who stood out in training camp. Brandon Shell, another guy, taken in the next round, round 5. This is a guy that, he's taken on that right tackle job. He hasn't exactly taken it and run with it. He's still got some work to do, but he's played well enough that he's held on to that job. He's had some good days, some bad days. And with him, it's going to be about consistency. I think everybody realized when he was taken in round 5, the Jets liked him, but they knew it was going to be a couple years before he was solidified himself. Some days it looks like he might be the guy. Other days, a little bit off balance, leans over his feet too much, and you see him getting moved around a little bit and abused. So his thing is consistency. I've heard some people say, his pass blocking is better than his run blocking. Is there a chance of moving to left tackle? I just don't see it happening. I think he's good enough for right tackle. I don't think he's quite a guy who can play on the left side. Lack Edwards, your punter, taken in the 7th round. People overlook it, but field position's big, man. You win that field position battle, you give yourself a much better chance to win the game every week. And he's a guy that improved in almost every statistical category from year 1 to year 2. So you have to like what Lack Edwards brings to the table, and really underappreciated guy because of the position he plays. Sharon Peak, another injury guy, but let's face it, 7th round guys, tough for them to stick, and did some things in camp that he looked pretty impressive. Didn't do a whole lot after that, and then missed all of last season with an injury. So some hits in there and a few misses. Then, of course, last year, way too early to judge these guys. But Jamal Adams, as we know, looked very good. Marcus May looked good at times, got beat up a little bit down the stretch. Darius Stewart and Chad Hansen, we didn't see nearly enough of them. Was that on Todd Bowles? Was that on John Morton? We'll see if we see more of them this year. But listen, we've talked about it. They have 17 receivers on the roster right now. I mean, that's just insane. 17 wide receivers. I know it's camp. I know it's off season. You carry 90 guys, but my goodness, 17 wide receivers. Someone's going to go. And I don't know if Chad Hansen and Ardarius Stewart, I don't know if they shouldn't be a little bit worried. Jordan Leggett, another injury guy last year, didn't really play. Dylan Donahue, another injury guy last year who didn't play, now having issues because of what we've learned, multiple DUIs. The team, though, does appear to be standing by him, having said that they do have some patience, but it is not unlimited, and they will wait and see what happens there. Elijah McGuire, a guy that I liked a lot last year out of the draft. He had some moments last year, wasn't great, but he looked good for a sixth-rounder, and he looked like a guy who would probably make some plays if the blocking had been a little bit better up front. But as we know, the O-line was a bit of a disaster. Beyond that, you had Jeremy Clark and Derek Jones, both projects, which is what you get that late in the draft. Clark out of Michigan, big guy, big corner, plays a little bit of safety, but didn't play last year. Was activated or taken off the injured list late last year, but didn't get in a game. Derek Jones, his insane off-the-charts measurables at the Combine, made him a target for some teams. I believe he had a 40-some-inch vertical. And the converted wide receiver from Ole Miss, so he was always going to be a project anyway, regardless of where he was drafted or where he landed, whether or not he sticks this year. I mean, I'd be surprised if he doesn't. I think he's a guy they're going to give him every chance, try to find a way for a guy that can possibly be as electric as he can with his size-speed combo and some of his measurables. I mean, that stuff doesn't always translate, but teams will tend to give a guy every chance to make it work out. So that's Mike Maccagnan's picks in a nutshell. Of course, some undrafted guys, Robbie Anderson, who didn't even pick, and he, probably the second or third best player that he's acquired, drafted, however you want to term it. Wasn't drafted, wasn't traded for, but man, if he can never get his head on straight, he's going to be a dangerous guy for many years. Doug Middleton was a guy that flashed as a rookie, got some playing time, looked like he was going to win a backup job last year, heading into the season. Then he got himself injured. Again, undrafted guy, but I think he's another one who'll get every chance to make the roster this year. So some good, some bad. The highlights, of course, are the first-rounders with Adams and Williams. Then, of course, you got a starting right tackle in Show. You got a starting outside linebacker in Jenkins. You got at least at this point, a role-playing back in McGuire. Stewart and Hansen still need some time to see them. And like I said, man, Deion Simon really thought after the way he played in his first year that his first couple of years that he was a guy who's going to see some significant playing time. And looks like that won't be the case with Pennell back on board. So that's that for him. And that's that for our show tonight. Plenty of draft talk. And as I said at the top, I know we are all very much looking forward to this finally being over. All the speculation, all the, the what-ifs, who's going to go at the top, who's the quarterback, and whether it's, as I said myself, whether it's Mayfield, Rosen, some people say Darnold is going to fall. I'm going to be happy regardless because to me, it's on this staff to make it happen, to make it work. Somebody's going to be taken with the third pick who's going to walk into that building in one Jets drive and is going to have the tools to be a franchise quarterback. And it's up to the staff to bring that out, and it's also down to their development. It's entirely possible the staff does the right things, and as we know, these guys are all projections. If this guy continues on this arc, if this guy does this, this, and this, he'll become this. You can coach him up as much as you can and find out that a guy isn't good enough to be an elite quarterback. But as I said earlier, there's no reason that they shouldn't get a good quarterback out of this draft and be able to build around that guy moving forward. So that is it for us tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Be sure to tune in next week. It'll be our normal. I know we don't have a quote-unquote normal time at the moment because it's been a little hectic, whether it's been technical stuff or getting guests lined up. We've moved some shows around, and we are expecting to have someone next week. I'm going to confirm that before I say it. But and as I said last week, we still have a couple options that we're looking at for a co-host, but we are not going to rush things because we want to try to make sure we get the right person in here and that it's a good fit for what we do. So as I said earlier, give me a follow at AceFan23, ACEFan23 on Twitter, and make sure that if you are not on the forums on JetNation.com, that you get in the forums on JetNation.com, because if you're a Jets fan and you love Jets talk, that's the place for you. There's a lot of great times, a lot of crazy people, and guarantee you'll enjoy it. So everybody have a great night, and we will be with you again in just a few days. Probably, Thursday? Yeah, so we're 4 or 5 days away from another show and 4 or 5 days closer to the NFL draft and what will hopefully be a franchise quarterback. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.